Hey pals, so here's a game for you. You know how the 90s gaming had a heap of these dungeon crawler type of games? Eye of the Beholder, Dungeon Masters, Anvil of Dawn and so on? Well, I've never really heard anyone mention Dungeon Hack for some reason, nor had I ever come across it during my sweet DOS-laden childhood. It's a product of Dreamforge Entertainment, the development team behind the aforementioned Anvil of Dawn, and a cursory glance revealed that they tried their hand at this dungeon crawling genre a respectable amount of times, and judging from what I've played before and have recently learned, they were pretty heckin' good at it. Sadly, Dreamforge disbanded around 2001 due to uphill battles with various publishers due to their handful of in-progress games that they weren't capable of finishing. And as a segue to publishers, Dungeon Hack was published by Strategic Simulations Inc., a cool name for a seemingly cool company. They were founded in 1979 and lasted all the way until 2001 before they were acquired by Ubisoft. And boy did they have a number of games. There's probably some parading their way on the screen as we speak. And as a side note, judging by the lists found online, this is hardly half of them. So once you boot up the game, the introduction cutscene sets its tone and a very bare-bones plot with the scene where the tepid player insert with an overcompensating cape involuntarily takes on a quest from a morally ambiguous sorcerer and gets thrown into a dungeon in search of an orb. Because reasons.
Hey, no, wait! No, wait!
Live or die, adventurer, but bring the orb to me.
Odd blood! My insides feel all twisted about. Shall we see what awaits?
Our mild-mannered moseying man then trash cans a troll with surprisingly little effort and steps inside the ominous dungeon, conveniently allowing himself to be cast aside to have his spotlight stolen by a pre-made character or one you can whip up yourself.
Bring on your worst, dungeon! I am ready!
The game features a tame selection of pre-made characters to choose from, but of course, in an RPG the customization plays a big part, and luckily the character creation process here is simple and allows you to pick from classes, races and alignments, which I'd wager are largely defined by the 2nd edition D&D rule set. Then you can choose to multi-class or just stick with a single one, and afterwards you'll slap a name and a face and bam, it's you or your favorite fantasy dude right there on the screen. Now this is one of the parts that I really like about the game. Similarly to System Shock and no doubt some other games that I might not know of, it features a customizable difficulty setting, most of the options you can see on the screen here. As the settings and the seed here might give away, one of the key features of the game is the random generation of the dungeons. The manual proudly boasts of over 4 billion variations of the dungeon, but neatly enough it does give you the seed of the created map for you to share, and even gives you the option to turn on permadeath, making this a proper old school roguelike experience, and I have to say that it hooked me for a great number of hours. And as a testament to that, I have roughly 9 hours of footage for this video, so go figure. I liked the customization quite a lot because it gave me a nice little learning curve as I started from these lukewarm ditty dungeons before trying my hand at these real hardcore pits of Hades. I still haven't beat the game and I don't think I've even come close, but I've seen most of what the game has to offer by now, and I have to say it still warrants more playthroughs and attempts in the future, and it has aged fairly well, much like many of the other games in its genre, and let's take a look at why that is the case. An impression I've got is that the game is incredibly easy to pick up and play. As you can see, the UI shouldn't look awfully obtuse to any of you astute viewers, yet there's a quirk or two that's worth mentioning. See the minimap? It displays nearby enemies as red dots, whether they're front, left or right of you, which grant this sort of a peripheral vision, and then there's how they've split up the inventory in a manner that's clunky to use in combat, but does free some space for the other functions, as it has 3 tabs that you can scroll through. As for the actual gameplay, it's about what you'd expect from other games of its genre and time. Mazes filled with monsters, loot, the occasional trap, quirky interactable items around the level, and the stairway to delve deeper into the dungeon, which always marks the end of the level. You can always climb up back to the earlier stages if you forgot or stashed items, or if you just want to explore around the corners that you never got around to. Oh, this actually reminds me, there's this neat thing where sometimes the game gives you a key or two too many to solve the level, since not all the locked passages lead to the stairs, so you might actually end up completing levels while still hanging on to a key or an environmental puzzle object that you just didn't get to use, and the game doesn't take them away between levels. It's really satisfying to cheat your way through a maddening exploration backtrack experience for a lost key when you just happen to have one laying around because you couldn't be bothered to completely hoover out the earlier stages. Of course, the elation of victory comes only through struggle, and boy are there many mean beings against you. There's a bunch of enemy variety here, with different attacks, from poisoning wyverns to spellcasters, and of course the leading cause of death among adventurers worldwide, ghouls with their goddamn paralyzing effects. The only real problem with the enemies that I found is that they're used a little too sparsely. Each stage has roughly 3 types of enemies at most. It's often divvied up in a way where you have the common enemy for the level, like a plain hobgoblin, and then there's the slightly more dangerous enemy that's used more sparingly, like a bugbear, and then sometimes the stairway down is guarded by a stat-boosted 3rd enemy variety that acts as a kind of a boss. Oh, and then there's this dungeon of indigestion. Heck, just listen to it. I don't know what's going on in here, but other than these guys, there's a nice little spook factor if you're into that eerily uncanny 90s digitized monster groaning. Much like other older dungeon crawlers, the game has no music save for the intro track, and it leaves a lot of the atmosphere to be done by the monster design, the noises they make, and the pleasant tile sets, which makes sure that you won't play the same level twice, although it ends up feeling like you do. I think games like these have a niche audience to begin with, and for me, playing them is a war of attrition against waning interest, but this one lends for pleasantly lengthy sessions. An hour or 2 before I keel over and croak because I slept while poisoned, an hour or 2 before my cleric meets his untimely death by reading a book he shouldn't have read, but the adjustable difficulty is one of the reasons to pick this game up from the pile of its peers. Leaving Eye of the Beholder or Anvil of Dawn before I get to complete them always felt a little bad, but you don't get that with Dungeon Hack, and I think it deserves more attention and some respect for being there with the other OGs of the loosely defined roguelike genre. So, I'd say if you're interested in an easy to get into dungeon crawler, pick up Dungeon Hack, skip a pizza and use those pennies to buy it from GOG or something. It's fun, it's simple in both good and bad, and it offers practically no story, but the monsters and their customizable habitats will keep you interested for a while. It sure worked for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.